I never thought a funeral could change my life so dramatically, but grandmother Eleanor's burial became the day I discovered who my family really was, and who I was meant to become. The morning started like any other tragic day. I stood beside my husband Marcus, in our black funeral attire, watching as his grandmother's mahogany casket was lowered into the earth. Eleanor Whitmore had been 93 sharp as a tack until the very end, and the matriarch of one of the wealthiest families in Charleston. She had always been kind to me, though distant. I was, after all, just Marcus's wife, the middle-class girl, who had somehow captured her golden grandson's heart 8 years ago. What I didn't know was that Eleanor had been watching me far more closely than I realized. What I couldn't have imagined was that she had been planning something that would expose every ugly truth about the family I had married into. The first sign something was wrong came at the reception. Marcus's brothers James and William were huddled in animated whispers with their father, Robert. Their wives stood nearby, designer purses clutched tightly, eyes gleaming with barely concealed excitement. I noticed how they kept glancing at me with strange expressions. Not grief, not sympathy, but something that looked almost like pity. "Rebecca," Marcus said, approaching me with an odd tension in his voice, "we need to talk." I followed him to the study, where the entire Whitmore clan had assembled. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, sat behind Eleanor's antique desk, with a thick folder of documents spread before him. The room smelled of old books and Eleanor's signature lavender perfume, a scent that would forever remind me of this moment. "Now that we're all here," Mr. Henderson began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "I'll read Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore's last will and testament." The reading began with the expected distributions. The family estate, worth $12 million, was divided among Robert and his 3 sons. The stock portfolio, valued at $8 million, was split the same way. The art collection, jewelry, and luxury cars followed the same pattern. With each bequest, I watched Marcus straighten in his chair, his eyes growing brighter with inherited wealth. Then Mr. Henderson paused, looking directly at me. "To my grandson Marcus's wife Rebecca Whitmore," he read, his voice careful and measured, "I leave all household items, furniture, and personal effects currently residing in the family estate, with the understanding that these items reflect the true measure of a home's worth." The room fell silent. Then James snorted, a sound he quickly covered with a cough. William's wife Patricia bit her lip to hide a smile. Even Marcus looked confused, as if wondering why his grandmother would burden me with old furniture when she could have left me money. "That is unusual," Robert said carefully. "Mother always was sentimental about her things." "Yes, well," Mr. Henderson continued, "Mrs. Whitmore was very specific about this bequest. She also left detailed instructions that Mrs. Rebecca Whitmore should have first access to the estate to collect her items before the property is prepared for sale." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Household items while everyone else inherited millions. I got Eleanor's old dishes and dusty furniture. The pity in their eyes now made sense. I was the poor relation being thrown scraps. Valuable scraps to me, perhaps, but nothing compared to their windfall. "That is very generous," I managed to say, though my voice came out smaller than intended. "Of course," Marcus said, reaching over to squeeze my hand, but his touch felt mechanical, distracted. He was already calculating his newfound wealth, already planning how to spend money that didn't even legally belong to him yet. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of our modest 2-bedroom house, the same house we'd been saving to upgrade for years, the same house that would now be replaced by something magnificent thanks to Marcus's inheritance. I should have been happy for him. For us, instead, I felt hollow, diminished, like I had been measured and found lacking by the woman I had respected most in the family. 3 days later, I drove alone to the Whitmore estate. Marcus had offered to come, but I could tell his heart wasn't in it. He was busy meeting with financial advisors, planning investments, scheduling viewings of luxury homes. The household items his grandmother left me were now my responsibility, my burden to sort through and remove. The estate was a sprawling Georgian mansion built in 1847, with 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, and enough antique furniture to fill a museum. As I walked through the empty halls, my footsteps echoing on hardwood floors, I tried to figure out where to even begin. How do you pack up 93 years of accumulated possessions? I started in Eleanor's bedroom, carefully wrapping her personal items in newspaper. Her jewelry box now empty, its contents having gone to Patricia and the other daughters-in-law sat forlornly on the vanity. Her clothes still hung in the massive walk-in closet, each piece a testament to refined taste and old money elegance. It was while packing her bedroom that I found the first strange thing. In the back of her closet behind evening gowns that hadn't been worn in decades, I discovered a small door I had never noticed before. It was only about 3 feet high, painted the same color as the wall, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Curious. I opened it and found myself staring into a hidden storage space, perhaps an old servant's access from the house's original construction. Inside were 3 items: a small wooden chest, a manila envelope thick with papers, and an old photograph of Eleanor as a young woman, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. The photograph was intriguing, but the wooden chest made my heart race. It was heavy, locked, but when I examined it closely, I found the key taped to the bottom. Inside were documents, deeds, certificates, legal papers, all bearing Eleanor's name, but dated from the 1950s and 1960s. Properties I had never heard of, investments that weren't mentioned in the will reading, business partnerships that seemed to have been forgotten by time, but it was the manila envelope that changed everything. Inside were photocopies of correspondence between Eleanor and various lawyers dating back 40 years. The letters told a story I could never have imagined. Eleanor hadn't just been a wealthy widow living off her deceased husband's fortune. She had been a shrewd businesswoman in her own right, secretly buying and selling real estate, making investments, building a second fortune that she had hidden from her own family. The letters revealed why. Robert, her son, had gambling debts in the 1980s that nearly bankrupted the family. James had been caught embezzling from his own company in the 1990s. William had a cocaine addiction that cost the family hundreds of thousands in rehab and legal fees. Even Marcus, my beloved husband, had his secrets, loans he had taken against his expected inheritance, debts he had accrued betting on cryptocurrency that his grandmother had quietly paid off to save his credit. Eleanor had been cleaning up their messes for decades, protecting the family name and fortune while her son and grandsons proved themselves unworthy of the legacy they were so eager to inherit. And all the while, she had been building something else, a safety net, a backup plan, a way to ensure the family's true wealth would go to someone she could trust. The final letter in the envelope was addressed to me, dated just 3 months before Eleanor's death. "My dear Rebecca," it began, "if you are reading this, it means my family has once again shown their true colors. I have watched you for 8 years, and I have seen what they cannot: your integrity, your strength, and your wisdom. You alone among them understand the value of things that cannot be bought or sold." My hands shook as I continued reading. "The household items I have left you include more than furniture and dishes. In my bedroom armoire, you will find a false back panel. Behind it are the deeds to 17 properties throughout South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. These properties were purchased with my personal funds over 40 years, and are not part of the estate my son and grandsons expect to inherit. They are worth approximately $24 million. I had to read that sentence 3 times before it sank in. $24 million, more than twice what the rest of the family had inherited combined. Also in the armoire, the letter continued, you will find certificates for stock holdings in my maiden name, Eleanor Morrison. These stocks, purchased between 1960 and 2020, are currently valued at approximately $16 million. Finally, there is a safe deposit box at First National Bank of Charleston, box number 847. The key is sewn into the lining of my jewelry box, which is among your household items. This box contains additional investments, gold, and documentation that will secure your financial future. The letter went on to explain the legal framework Eleanor had constructed. Everything had been placed in a trust that would activate only when I claimed my household items. The trust was ironclad, managed by a law firm in Atlanta that had no connection to the Charleston legal community. Robert and his sons would have no legal recourse, no way to contest what Eleanor had done. I chose you, the letter concluded. Because you are the only one who truly loved this family without expecting anything in return. You are the only one who saw the house as a home, not an investment. You are the only one who would use this wealth to build something meaningful rather than simply consume it. The choice of what to do with this inheritance is yours alone, but remember, my dear, true power lies not in having wealth, but in having the wisdom to use it well. I sat on Eleanor's bedroom floor for an hour, surrounded by boxes of worthless household items that were apparently worth $40 million, trying to process what had just happened. My entire world had shifted. I wasn't the poor relation who got the scraps. I was the heir to a fortune larger than anything the Whitmore men could have imagined, but Eleanor's final test wasn't over. The letter included one more instruction: you will know what to do when the time comes. Over the next week, I continued packing the estate, saying nothing to Marcus or his family about what I had discovered. I carefully removed the deeds, stock certificates, and bank keys, storing them in a safety deposit box of my own. To everyone else, I was just dutifully sorting through old furniture and dishes, the devoted wife, handling the tedious aftermath of the inheritance distribution. Marcus, meanwhile, was already spending money he didn't yet have. He had put a deposit on a mansion in the historic district, ordered a new BMW, and started talking about early retirement. His brothers were equally reckless. James had booked a month-long European vacation, and William was shopping for a yacht. The reckoning came 2 weeks later, at what was supposed to be a celebration dinner at Charleston's most expensive restaurant. The family had gathered to toast their good fortune and discuss their plans for their newfound wealth. I sat quietly, dressed in a simple black dress, while the men in my life celebrated their inheritance with champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. To Grandmother Eleanor, Marcus said, raising his glass, who always knew how to take care of family. To family, Robert echoed, and to the wisdom of knowing who deserves what. That last comment was clearly directed at me, a reminder that while they had inherited millions, I had gotten furniture. The subtle condescension wasn't lost on anyone at the table, including the wives, who smiled behind their champagne flutes with poorly concealed satisfaction. It was James who decided to twist the knife deeper. "Rebecca," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "I hope you are not feeling left out. Grandmother always was practical about these things. She knew you'd appreciate the sentimental value of her household items." "Very thoughtful," Patricia added, "giving you things you could actually use." The table fell silent, waiting for my response. This was my moment, Eleanor's test. How would I use the power she had given me? I set down my champagne glass and looked around the table at these people who had been my family for 8 years. These people who had just revealed that they saw me as unworthy of real wealth, deserving only of their scraps and pity. "You are absolutely right," I said, my voice calm and steady. Eleanor was very practical. She knew exactly who deserved what. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single document, a copy of one of the property deeds I had found. I placed it on the table next to my plate. "She also left me this," I said. "It is the deed to the waterfront property in Hilton Head. You know, the one worth about $3 million. The color drained from Robert's face. Marcus stared at the document like it might bite him. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "Neither did I at first," I replied, pulling out more documents. "But then I found 17 more deeds just like it, and stock certificates worth about $16 million, and the key to a safe deposit box that contains." Well, let's just say Eleanor was very thorough in her planning. The silence at the table was deafening. I could hear the restaurant's ambient noise, other diners laughing, glasses clinking, the soft jazz playing in the background, but at our table, no one moved, no one breathed. William was the first to speak. "That is impossible. We saw the will. You got household items." "I did," I agreed, and it turns out that Eleanor's definition of household items was more comprehensive than any of us realized. She was very specific that these items reflected the true measure of a home's worth. Apparently, that measure is about $40 million. Patricia's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. A waiter hurried over to clean up the mess, but nobody at our table acknowledged him. "$40 million, Marcus whispered. "That is impossible. we knew her finances, we knew what she had. You knew what she wanted you to know, I corrected. Eleanor Morrison was quite the businesswoman. She spent 40 years building a second fortune in her maiden name. And apparently, she decided that you all had proven yourselves unworthy of inheriting it. I gathered the documents and put them back in my purse. Then I stood up, placing my napkin beside my untouched dinner. Thank you for a lovely evening, I said, and thank you for showing me exactly who you are. Eleanor always said that wealth reveals character. Tonight you've all revealed yours. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marcus, I said, not bothering to turn around. You might want to cancel that deposit on the new house. Something tells me your inheritance might not cover it after the lawyers are done sorting out Eleanor's true estate. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, leaving behind 8 people who had just realized that the woman they had pitied, the woman they had dismissed as unworthy of their family's wealth, was now worth more than all of them combined. The legal battles began immediately. Of course, Robert hired the best lawyers money could buy, challenging the trust, questioning Eleanor's mental state, claiming undue influence. But Eleanor had anticipated this. Her Atlanta lawyers had documented everything meticulously. She had undergone psychological evaluations to prove her competency. She had video recordings explaining her decisions. She had built an unbreakable legal fortress around her true inheritance. 6 months later, I stood in the empty mansion that had once belonged to the Whitmore family. They had been forced to sell it to pay their legal fees, their own inheritance tied up in court, while Eleanor's trust remained untouchable. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had lost the house they grew up in while fighting for money that was never really theirs. Marcus had filed for divorce. Of course, he couldn't stand being married to a woman who had more wealth and power than he did. The settlement was quick and clean. I kept what was mine. He kept what was his, and we both pretended the 8 years of marriage had meant something before Eleanor's death revealed the truth about all of us. I never moved into the Whitmore estate. Instead, I bought a modest house near the ocean, the kind of place Eleanor would have appreciated, comfortable, understated, chosen for its character rather than its ability to impress others. I used her money the way she would have wanted, funding scholarships for first-generation college students, supporting local businesses, investing in community development projects that would benefit people for generations. But perhaps the most satisfying investment I made was purchasing the restaurant where my former family had expected me to accept their condescension with grace. I renovated it, hired better staff, and turned it into the kind of place that celebrates family rather than wealth. On the wall of the main dining room, I hung a portrait of Eleanor Morrison Whitmore, with a small plaque that reads, "In memory of a woman who understood that the true measure of worth cannot be bought or sold." Sometimes former friends or acquaintances ask me about the divorce, about the inheritance, about how it feels to have gone from the family charity case to its wealthiest member overnight. I always give them the same answer Eleanor taught me: true wealth isn't about what you have, it is about knowing what you deserve. And I finally know what I deserve. Not pity, not scraps, not the role of the grateful wife who should be happy with whatever she is given. I deserve respect, dignity, and the power to choose my own path. Eleanor's letter ended with one final piece of wisdom that I carry with me every day. Wealth is a tool, not a trophy. Use it to build the life you want, not to display the life others expect. I built the life I want. It is quieter than my old life, more purposeful, filled with people who value character over net worth, and every morning, when I look in the mirror, I see the woman Eleanor saw in me all along, someone worthy of trust, worthy of respect, worthy of inheritance that came not from bloodline or marriage, but from proven merit. The Whitmore men are still fighting in court, still claiming they deserve money that was never meant for them. They'll lose, of course, Eleanor made sure of that. But their fight isn't really about money anymore, it is about accepting a truth they never saw coming. Sometimes, the quiet ones are watching, sometimes, the dismissed ones are the chosen ones, and sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money at all. It is the knowledge that someone believed you deserved better than what you settled for. Eleanor gave me more than $40 million. She gave me the power to rewrite my own story, and that, it turns out, is worth more than all the money in the world. But did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I am looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect. Asterisk.